So Tasha will be here to monitor the chat for questions and answers throughout the presentation. All right, so welcome to editing, killing your darlings, a gruesome sounding phrase that is well known in creative writing circles. It just means that in writing, nothing can become too precious, that it can't be deleted from a piece of writing if it's no longer serving the purpose of the discussion taking place on the paper. The focus of our discussion will be navigating the revision process. I'd like to start by getting a feel for the room. I know there's just a couple of you, but if you could please add in the chat what brought you here today. If you're just here to learn more about editing your assignments, or if you're working on a short story or have a manuscript you're tackling, or maybe an interest in publishing as a career option. Okay, that's okay. Oh, I think we have an answer. I'm trying to write creative nonfiction, but I'm still at the very beginning of it. That's awesome. Eva, I love creative nonfiction. I'd love to hear more about your project. So, yeah.
Oh, right now?
Hi, can you say that again?
Yeah, I wondered if, interactive?
Yeah, feel free, especially since we're such a small group, feel free to just jump on in.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I a yoga teacher. I was a master and then a teacher 20 years now. And I've mostly worked with kids and then adults up to.
Eva, I'm sorry, your mic is cutting out. I think I heard that you were a yoga teacher for the last 50 years. Is that correct?
Not quite, 20.
20. Okay. I was like, wow, okay. And so what brought you to nonfiction?
And I don't know, there is a story that wants to be told.
Yes.
I have not found the right angle or the right hook yet. So, yeah.
Okay, and if you don't mind me asking, are you on faculty here or are you a student?
I'm a student.
Okay, great. Just so you know, I am actually getting my master's in nonfiction, and if you ever want to run your work by and talk some stuff out, I'm here, Decha Cullen. And maybe we can point you in some direction, or just talking can sometimes help you get going.
Well, I have taken a creative writing class in the summer.
Okay.
And that gave me some basic ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sitting down and writing the book is a very different story.
Exactly. It really is quite the undertaking. So where are you at with that process right now? Are you like just right at the beginning? You said you haven't started getting a manuscript together?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. I hope you learned some things today that will help you. Once you get going, have that raw material to kind of start editing it down and whittling it into a piece of artwork.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about a common misconception. that editing and proofreading are part of the same stage of the writing process. That's not true. They're actually two separate things, and we're going to discuss that. So let's take a closer look at revision, editing, and proofreading. So revision, or revisioning your paper, is looking for big picture, structural, logical changes that need to be made. At this stage, you'll check for things like if ideas need to be developed further, if you've articulated the relationship between your ideas, or if you need to add any further evidence or support. Editing is more local changes to sentence structure or word choice, which leads to an improved style and coherence. Careful editing is critical to a polished, well-written paper. If revision is molding the overall shape of a piece, editing is crafting it with a fine tool into artwork. And then there's proofreading, which is a final sweep, or sweeps, as you'll find out, through your paper with an eye for errors. Tasha is adding a link to the chat, which has a lot of questions you can ask yourself at each stage to keep refining your paper in this to a more polished final draft. Okay, see you next. So like I said, editing and proofreading are separate parts of revision tasks. Both editing and proofreading demand close and careful reading, but they focus on different aspects of writing and employ different techniques. It's important to keep the editing and proofreading stages separate because when editing an early draft, you don't want to be bothered with thinking about punctuation, grammar, and spelling. You should be thinking about the more important big picture tasks like developing and connecting ideas. I found a fun way to think about the writing process from Dinty Moore's craft book, Crafting the Personal Essay, which Eva is a wonderful book for anyone interested in nonfiction writing. I go back to that one all the time.
Could you put the title in the chat, please?
Yes, check here, Tasha. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay. So this idea of the writing process came from that craft book, which Tasha is putting the title of in the chat. So thinking of the writing process as different stages, you should begin writing with childish wonder. Children just play. They don't worry about rules or regulations. At this stage of the writing process, anything goes. You don't stop free writing to look up how a word is spelled or think about your word count. You just write anything that comes to mind without a filter. Even if it's a blank line placeholder for a word that has escaped you at the moment, because I think we've all been there, all of that goes at this part of the writing process. Eventually, you must move to the adult stage. This is when you begin the editing process. Ask yourself questions of purpose and style. Are you meeting the requirements of the assignment? Do you have a strong thesis and topic sentences? What evidence do you need to back up your points? The parent's critical voice comes at the very end. This is more the proofreading stage. Are there any misspellings, capitalization, grammar, or punctuation errors? Did you cite sources correctly? Is the font of your header the same as the rest of your paper? Even these like little things. This is the time to be thinking about that. The stage adds a polish to your paper, which will make a good first impression on your reader. Okay, so I like to remember this as childish wonder, adult logic, and then parental guidance, all important to the writing process. But if you're sitting down to write your novel, your piece of writing, of any kind of writing really, and you're in that childish wonder stage, but you're thinking about parental things like capitalization, spelling, all of that can lead you to writer's block. So at the beginning, just feel free to do whatever comes to mind, really? Okay. So here are some tips that'll work for the editing and proofreading stage, because sometimes there is a little bit of overlap. So get some distance from the text. It's hard to edit or proofread a paper you've just finished writing. It's still too familiar to you, and you tend to skip over a lot of errors. So put your paper away for a few hours, days, or if you have the time, even weeks can be great. Clear your head of what you've written so you can come back with a fresh look and see what's actually happening on the page. Even better, have a friend review your work. Someone who's never read your paper before will come with completely fresh eyes and catch more than you will because you're so familiar with the paper. So let's see, the best medium. So that just means some people edit best at a computer. Others like to mark up a printed copy. You can try out both and see what works best for you. For me, I like to edit at the computer, but find it easier to catch errors on a hard copy during proofreading. So it's really what works best for you. And then changing the look of your document. That can be altering size, spacing, color, font style. All of this can trick your brain into thinking you're looking at an unfamiliar document, which can help you get a different perspective and catch more of those errors. So this one seems like a no-brainer, but find a quiet place to work. It can really be hard to do at sometimes. But it's best to work in an environment that's distraction-free so you can concentrate. And then edit and proofread in short blocks of time. This can help because your concentration may start to wane if you try to proofread the entire text at one time. And again, that's just really overwhelming. So give yourself time to break it up and do it in little spurts. Okay, let's talk more about editing. During the editing process, you'll assess if your paper is well organized, if the transitions between paragraphs are smooth, if your paragraphs are structured logically, if your paper reads clearly and is in the proper voice for that assignment, and if your evidence is backing up your argument. Now, that's a lot, right? And it can seem overwhelming at first, but the more you practice this process, the easier and more efficient it will become. A great way to make sure to present the most polished paper possible is to break editing down into different stages. So what I'm about to show you is just an example, like will be a theme throughout this whole presentation. Do what works best for you, okay? But here's an example of how you could split up the editing process. So begin with the big picture edit, which should address questions such as, do you have a strong introduction that hooks the reader? Does the content flow logically? Does the ending sum up your main points and include a call to action if needed? Have you done everything the assignment requires? Is your paper in the right tone? Is it informative, argumentative, persuasive, whatever it was supposed to be? Then you go to a second edit. These questions are more targeted, like, are there any sections where you repeat your ideas? Does each paragraph contain just one topic? Are big chunks of text broken up with subheadings and paragraph breaks? Do you use data, statistics, and quotations to back up your points? Or have you presented your points both strongly and as concisely as possible? Then you can move on to a third edit, which is even more targeted, with questions like, do your sentences vary in length? Can you replace weak verbs and adjectives with stronger ones? Are you using the passive voice? So focusing on larger structural issues first and then refining your editorial eye through these stages will ensure your paper will provide a solid draft ready for proofing. All right, here's some editing tips. Again, you need to do whatever's best for you, and you won't have to use all of these steps every time, but learn what works best and then keep that as part of your routine. So let's see, keeping a checklist. So this is just tracking your writing issues. So you can look out for what you know you're weakest at every pass. Some are obvious, like grammatical errors. Others are less so, like the consistency of character throughout a story. So using digital tools. Most writing software has a function that allows you to use track changes, which will help you organize your edits. I don't know if anyone has used track changes in Microsoft Word, but it really streamlines all those quick edits as you go along. Kind of marks it up like red ink that your teacher used to put all over your paper, and it looks real fun. You'll feel real smart afterwards. So rely on study guides. When you copy edit, keep an authoritative style guide handy, like the Chicago Manual of Style. I believe we're in 17th issue right now, or a thesaurus, which can be useful at times if wielded properly. And then do a read through before you pick up your red pen. When you're editing a completed first draft, read through the entire paper or manuscript before making line edits. That first read should just be big picture clarity, a consistent writing style, and to scan for glaring omissions. Do this before rewriting anything. And then you go in and do a line by line edit. Do a line edit, which means going through each line, as the title suggests, and check for basic spelling, grammar, and syntax issues. And make sure to be using the active voice. There are some times where passive might be better, but for the most part, your sentences should be active. Look for ways to replace passive voice verbs with active ones. I believe, Tasha, there's a link that will be going into the chat. But there's also another tip from, it's actually Grammar Girl, and it's about zombies, which is easy to remember. So when you have a sentence and you think it might be passive, add by zombies after the verb. After the verb, Tasha? Yeah. And so if the sentence still makes sense, you're in passive voice. If it doesn't make sense, you're in active. And I wish I had thought about this earlier so I could bring in an example. Tasha, can you look for Grammar Girl's zombie thing?
Online?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. If Tasha can find it, she'll throw it into the chat. That was my fault. Okay, so let's move on for now. So breaking up long sentences. Make sure you vary your sentence structure and retain your reader's attention. And then this one's fun. An exercise that can spark new thoughts and improve the flow of your paper is by trying to rearrange your paragraphs. For this activity, it's best to print your paper and then cut out each paragraph and lay them on a flat surface. Then you can rearrange your paragraphs and see if any improvements can be made to the flow or if any new ideas arise from this activity. All right, so moving from proofreading or from editing to proofreading. So in the chat, or I believe we're still a small group, if you want to unmic, that's fine. I'd love to hear how long you usually spend proofreading a paper on average. Tasha, do you spend a lot of time proofreading?
Absolutely. I usually recruit other people because you just are too close to it when you are the writer, and you'll miss things that other people will catch that may or may not be glaringly obvious to you.
I'll say when I was a TCC student and an undergrad student, I probably didn't proofread as much. Nowadays, I'm kind of OCD with my proofreading. Just keep going back to it, keep going back to it. Did anyone feel like sharing? Okay, that's fine.
And if you'd rather, you can always type it in the chat if you don't want to talk to us directly. But that's an option too. If you have a question at any point, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, and we'll do our best to respond.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's just move forward. But if anything comes up, don't hesitate to just type it into the chat. Tasha will stop me and say, "Hey, question." Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay, great.
For me, it seems the whole editing process takes much longer than the writing process.
That's very common, and I think it should. You know, the writing process, you're just kind of getting out ideas. But like I said, you start off with like raw clay, right? And as you're editing, as you're going through all these steps, you're fine tuning and turning it into something really special. So that's common, and I would say that's how it should be.
Thanks.
In fact, I'm glad it takes longer because this is where I really like to be. I like editing and revising even better than writing. So
just know you're doing it right if that's what's happening.
Exactly. Thanks for asking. Did that kind of address your question or your concern?
Yeah, it does. It does, because I felt there must be something wrong with me. I shouldn't have to spend so much time on it.
No, that means you're doing it right, because this is where the real work comes in. I mean, it's kind of easy to sit down and just write, especially if you're a good writer. But getting in and fine-tuning and honing your craft, that's where it's going to take more time, and that's completely normal. And I hope you can feel comfortable with that. Anything else? All right, let's rock and roll. So it's critical to note the importance of proofreading your work. The way a paper looks affects the way others judge it, whether you like it or not. That's just how it is. And you don't want careless errors distracting your reader from what you have to say. You want to make a good impression, keep those people reading, especially if it's a book, a whole book. They can put it down at any time, and you need to keep them really into it. Many people only devote a few minutes to proofreading, often without taking a break from the work. But a quick cursory reading after sitting with your words for a long time can actually miss a lot. It's better to work with a definite plan that helps you to search systematically for specific errors. Having this plan in place could help you worry less about editing while you're writing your first drafts, which, as we talked about, can lead to writer's block if you're thinking about it too early on. Let's talk about some strategies for proofreading. All right, spell checkers and grammar checkers. They definitely have their place. Sorry, they definitely have their place. I know that I still turn to Grammarly to double check myself because, like I said, I'm OCD. But these programs can be helpful. But spell checkers work with a limited dictionary and won't catch misspellings that form another valid word. Grammar checkers work with a limited number of rules and won't identify every error, and they often make mistakes. They don't always pick up on context, especially in creative writing, I would say. So you need to be able to evaluate the feedback these checkers provide, because they're not always right, but they can help you catch some of the small errors that your eyes have just kind of glazed over during this process. So proofread for only one kind of error at a time. So it's easier to catch grammar errors if you aren't checking punctuation and spelling at the same time. Also, some techniques work well for spotting one kind of mistake better than others, and I believe we talk about that a little further on this slide. So read your work out loud. This is the advice I give to every student. I think we all give this to every student, because it forces you to say each word and also lets you hear how the words sound together. When you read silently or too quickly, you may skip over errors and make unconscious corrections. So read slowly, make sure to read every word. And it's even better if you can have someone read it out loud. The students come into the writing center and we read these papers to them and they're cringing. A lot of times they're cringing. But it's always helpful. You get to hear the flow of the piece if you were saying what you meant to be saying. And so it's cringeworthy at first, and then they feel, I think, more confident with it. So if you can have someone else read it to you, hear it in someone else's voice, that's even better. So circling every punctuation mark, which forces you to look at each mark. Ask yourself, if each mark is being used correctly. Don't be afraid to use those guidebooks, style books to turn to for more guidance if you're not positive. Okay, this one, I honestly have never done this, but it sounds like it could be fun. Read your paper backwards to focus on spelling. So if you know that spelling is one of your weaknesses, which we all have weaknesses, try reading your paper backwards from the last word to the first, reading each word separately. That sounds like a challenge, right? But it makes you focus on the spelling of each word because content, punctuation, and grammar won't make any sense. So if that's one of your weaknesses that you've identified, that can definitely be a good strategy to focus on your spelling. So we're back to those weaknesses, yay. So like we discussed in the editing section, keep a list of proofreading specific errors you tend to make on a notepad near your workstation. For example, comma splices, run-on sentences, spelling, capitalization of proper nouns, those kind of things. That way, you will know what to pay attention to during proofreading time. So if you don't mind, in the chat, or feel free to unmic yourself, and let us know what your writing weaknesses are. Don't feel shy to share because we all have them. I definitely have them. Tasha's shaking her head, yes. And just tell us what your writing weaknesses are.
For me, it's really the structure. I'm a little dyslexic, so somehow even structure-wise, it's difficult for me to develop the sequence that a reader can follow, because what's important for me may not be important for anyone else to understand the point I'm trying to make.
Good point, right. Have you had anyone read your paper for you? Like, even if it's in like a really messy stage, that's okay. Have you had anyone look at it?
Well, some essays I just wrote for myself. A friend looked at it and she did that for me, which was really helpful and showed me where I was and what I needed to pay more attention to. So I can find it now a little better, but it's just takes an awful lot of time.
I understand, and especially having like dyslexia, I know that can be more difficult, and especially to share your writing, which you obviously are very passionate about. I think having your friend read is a great idea, because like you said, it tells you what sections maybe you need to be working on, and I would say have more than one person read it. See if I think that's what's so great about workshops in education is you start to see if everybody's not understanding the same thing. So I want to kind of say that remember that every book that you read, that beautiful polished little book, has been through so many different editors. Editors, proofreaders, it's been through a lot of stages to get to that. So sitting down with your messy work, knowing your weakness, you have dyslexia, that's fine. Knowing that ahead of time, knowing that you will need to run it through people, all of this, it's just part of the process of strengthening your writing, correct?
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Tasha, what are some of your writing weaknesses?
Well, I don't know if we have time. No, I think this is a really good point, just to be aware of it, because you'll start to censor yourself when you're in that editing process for your own paper and find your mistakes more often. So I'd say a weakness that I have is particularly apparent when I'm working on marketing pieces or content development, because I'll sometimes lose track of who my audience is. Mm-hmm. And I'll see that I shift from maybe first or second person into third person and back into second person. And that's something that, because it's in my head and I'm so close to the work, I probably won't catch unless I have someone else read it and they say, oh, wait, you shifted your perspective a little bit here. You need to correct that and, keep it in second person. So that's something that I have on my radar all the time, because I know that I have a tendency to slip. And honestly, spell check has made me a terrible speller. So I would say spelling can be a weakness of mine too. I get confused, and I'm somewhat dyslexic too, so I switch my letters around and things. So I know I need to take my time and research words that maybe I don't know how to spell, or just say it out loud so that I know that it's correct. But yeah, you can be a great writer and have a lot of weaknesses, and that's okay as long as you're aware of them and you're working towards strengthening your other strengths as well.
And Tasha, have you tried reading your paper backwards, word by word?
No, but I played the Beatles' White Album backwards.
Well, I know, while we're sharing, some of my weaknesses are that I tend to write a lot. I wouldn't say run on sentences, but just a lot of extra details that aren't needed. So knowing that about myself, I know that that's something I need to weed out through the revision process during editing. And a question that I'm constantly asking myself, especially in my creative nonfiction writing, which it can start to sound like a journal entry if you don't keep your reader in mind and remember that you're writing for the reader, not for yourself. And that's kind of where the kill your darlings come in, because if it's important to you, but it's not landing right with the reader, it has to go. This isn't your writing, it's the reader's. It's for the reader. So I know a lot of my little darlings end up on the floor during the editing process. And then also I'm really weak with verb tense consistency. That's something I noticed throughout my entire education. So that's something I'm constantly asking myself, okay, where is this sentence at? Line by line, looking at, am I talking about, verb tense in the right tense, at that time? And it's line by line, section by section. All right, well, thank you for sharing with us, Eva. Really appreciate that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that even the most seasoned writers have something that they're weak at, something they have to make sure and double check themselves on. And, as you get used to writing and revising and everything, those weaknesses might become lesser. I would hope so. But sometimes they just don't go away. I still can't spell definitely to save my life the first time. Okay. So let's look at the next one. Keep calm and revise, revise, revise. Remember, like we just discussed, proofreading is a learning process. So keep helpful handbooks and dictionaries close at hand while proofreading. The proofreading process will become more efficient as you develop and practice the systematic strategy that works best for you. And I think that's something important to note is don't worry about everything I said today. If you're like, that doesn't really resonate with me, that's okay. The writing process is for you, like whatever your needs are.
Oh, I have a good anecdotal story for that.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So I was coaching another writer who feels like there's some elusive club that people belong to who want to write books, and she is not a part of that club. That's what she told me. And she said, I don't know if I'm doing this correctly. I don't know if there's a specific process I'm supposed to undergo to complete my book. And then in our conversation, she found herself saying, well, maybe it's my process to write the book. There's not this one right way to write a book. And I think that if I could have jumped up and down and amplified that on Marshall Amps, I would, because that's so true. There's not one right way to write a book, or really anything, an essay or an article.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tasha. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That was spot on. Thank you. So here are a couple or 3 handbooks that I keep by me while writing that I find the most helpful. And yeah, all 3 of these are on my desk at home while I write every day. Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, that's classic. Tasha's doing a fist pump right now. I think that's, it's like this concise little guide to pretty much everything you need to know about grammar and punctuation, and it's really targeted. That I would highly recommend. What Was I makes grammar just a little more accessible, I would say. It's it has language that is not intimidating, if that makes sense. And then Comma Sense, I know that we've used that here in the Writing Center for some of our presentations on punctuation. It's kind of comical, isn't it, Tasha? Mm-hmm. It's just, I find it, again, accessible, very funny. Yeah, very funny. So that one I like to refer to for sure. Leave that up for a second longer in case anyone is trying to take note.
Do any of you have anything you would add to this recommendation list?
Oh yeah, because there's tons of handbooks. These are just a few. Do you have any handbooks that you like to keep close by, Tasha?
Strunk and White and Comma Sense for sure.
Yeah.
Those are my go-tos. And the Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips. She has some great tips too.
Does she have a book, or is it just her website? Oh, I'm gonna have to look into that. I didn't know that. I love Grammar Girl. She really breaks things down into
digestible segments.
Exactly. Grammar Girl is a great person to turn to for anything, really. What's the difference between affect and effect? I just looked at that the other day because I still have trouble with that one every single time. Okay. And I told Eva about the nonfiction book that I used the most. Yeah, I wanted to add that. I didn't know if anyone would be really particularly into nonfiction, so. All right, and then a last plug. I kept this in case anyone was interested in publishing as a career. But also, if you're just a writer trying to write a manuscript, learning more about the publishing process and understanding what to expect if you are lucky enough to get your manuscript into the hands of an editor and into the publishing process could be beneficial. So I wanted to tell you about the Denver Publishing Institute, which is a program that I went to this summer. It's an intensive 4-week graduate certificate program. It's located in Denver, Colorado, but has been offered remotely for the last 2 years. I just went to one of the remote offerings. And it's taught by seasoned publishing professionals and discusses all the different facets of book publishing: editing, marketing, publicity, sales, legal topics like subsidiary rights, which I didn't know what that was before this program, cover design, children's book publishing, and more. I mean, anything you want to know about publishing was in this thing. It's a great introduction to book publishing, highly regarded by publishing professionals. And Tasha's putting a link to the program's page if anyone's interested. So just so you know, a little context about the Publishing Institute. There are only 3 programs that offer a certificate in book publishing. This one is in Denver. The other 2 are in the New England states, and which I don't know much about their content. I do know people that went to both the DPI, Denver Publishing Institute, and one of the other programs. And what they came back with is that the DPI gives a broader discussion on publishers from across the U.S., while the other two focus on New York City, where the big five are located, which a lot of publishing is up there. But the DPI opened up so many options for being in the publishing field that are not in New York, because I have no interest in going to New York forever and ever. So if you're interested, Tasha added that link to the chat. Go check them out. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I guess now I just want to open it up to the room and ask if anyone has any further questions or concerns that you'd like to talk through.
I've also dropped in the evaluation link in the chat. So if you could please, we are asked to gather that information from you. So please do evaluate this session for us.
Thank you, Tasha.
Could you please repeat the title of the book you recommended at the very beginning? I did not catch it.
Oh, sure. It's Crafting the Personal Essay. And it's by Denty Moore. So the nonfiction piece that you're working on, Eva, is it going to be kind of a memoir type?
Well, it will be more than a memoir. I mean, I will use personal experience, but mostly I would like to really make the yoga philosophy more accessible as really a lifestyle, a help for, a healthy lifestyle.
That's awesome. Tasha and I are both sitting here nodding our heads like, yes, we would read this. We really would. I think that's great. So have you been reading a lot of nonfiction that is similar to that? In like objective, maybe?
Who wrote A Year by the Sea?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. Just a second.
Okay.
Joan Anderson.
Joan Anderson, Tasha says. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that one myself.
Yes, that's her.
Okay.
Then what's the other one? She's a writer. She gives writing classes, Bird by Bird.
Tasha's happy with this one.
Anne Lamott, yeah, she's one of our favorites.
Oh, Anne Lamott. Okay.
Yeah, Anne Lamott. Thank you. I have trouble with names today.
Well, and I know you said that you've had trouble like getting started. I would suggest reading as many books that are, even if the topic's different, are in the same kind of format that you would like to see your manuscript go into, because you can get kind of a feel of how to structure, especially since you said that structure is something you are challenged by. That can be something that can be really helpful, I would say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And another book that you can look into, it's more for the memoir side, but it's The Art of Memoir. And it's by her name, I just had it. Cherry. Tasha's looking it up because my brain just went out on me. Oh, Mary Carr. It's The Art of Memoir by Mary Carr. She's a writing professor. I forget at which big fancy college, but she's written several memoirs, really well known. Lit, Cherry. Can't remember her most one, but that's another craft book that I would recommend as well. It's one I turn to a lot.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you want to bring anything down to have one of us look at, I know My jam is nonfiction, but everyone here would be so happy to look at creative stuff. We love looking at assignments, of course, helping with any kind of writing, but I think a lot of us are creative writers, so we'd definitely be up to looking at that if you're interested.
You are at Trinity, or where are you located?
At Trinity River campus, yes.
River. When I'm at Northeast, does that make a difference?
No, not at all. And if you feel like coming, driving in to meet in person, that's wonderful. If not, we can always meet over Zoom. Well, not Zoom, but over Teams and talk. Or we can talk over the phone and look at the same paper, whatever works best for you.
Wow, that's very generous.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully,
I probably find you on the regular, I don't know, list of professors or yeah.
I'm in the Writing Center's tutor. I'm just one of the tutors down here. So if you have you used TutorTrack before with Northeast?
I think my very first essay I submitted to a tutor.
Okay. Well, if you want to just call us, I didn't keep that information on here, unfortunately, but I can give you our phone number if you feel like just calling and having someone set an appointment for you. That would be great. That number, if you're ready, I can give it to you.
Yes, I am.
Okay. It's 817-515-1069.
1069. All right.
And you can work, of course, with any tutor, but if you'd like for me to look at your nonfiction, just let them know to set you up with me, okay?
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing and talking with us today. I really appreciate it.